Iran says 220 Americans died yesterday. Washington says 8. Same war, same strikes, same satellite imagery showing bases reduced to craters. Both numbers cannot be true. And the one that's false is the one coming from your own government. That number, 220, didn't come from a leaked document passed through back channels. It didn't come from an anonymous intelligence source speaking off the record in a parking garage. It came directly from Iran's armed forces spokesperson, stated publicly on camera for the official record. A formal military declaration that in a single coordinated operational period across Bahrain and multiple Gulf installations, simultaneously, 220 American military personnel were killed. America's official response to that declaration was 8 casualties, maybe 10. And when you place those two numbers next to the satellite imagery of what those bases looked like after the strikes, when you look at the before and after images of functioning military installations reduced to craters and rubble, you are left with only two possible explanations. Either the bases were completely empty at the time of the strikes, which means they served zero military function and cost American taxpayers billions of dollars to construct and maintain for absolutely no strategic purpose. Or the real casualty numbers are being deliberately and systematically hidden from the American public in figures so catastrophic that if they were released tomorrow morning, this war would be over before the week ended. The soldiers who were on those bases know what happened. The field medics who triaged the wounded in the hours after the strikes know what the patient count looked like. The chaplain who sat beside the dying know the truth of what those installations looked like when the smoke finally cleared. And piece by piece, through satellite imagery and testimony, and the kind of leaks that always emerge when governments fight wars they cannot win and cannot honestly explain to the people paying for them in blood and money, the truth is going to surface. It always does. Every single time in recorded history that a government has tried to manage and suppress casualty numbers in a losing war, the truth has eventually come out. The only variable is how many more people die in the interval between the lie and the moment it collapses. But here is what makes this specific moment categorically different from every previous development in this conflict, and why the next 72 hours represent the most dangerous window since this war began. America has quietly, without press conference, without public announcement, without the kind of transparent explanation that a functioning democracy is supposed to provide when it makes decisions of this magnitude, flown its E-6B Mercury nuclear command aircraft into the Gulf region. If you have never heard of the E-6B Mercury, that is not an accident, and it is not a gap in your education. It is not a fighter aircraft. It does not carry conventional bombs or missiles. It does not transport troops or supplies. It carries one specific thing, which is the command and control infrastructure for America's entire nuclear arsenal. It is the airborne platform from which the United States military would coordinate, authorize, and execute nuclear strikes in the scenario where ground-based command systems have been destroyed, compromised, or rendered non-functional by enemy action. The E-6B Mercury exists for exactly one operational purpose, which is to ensure that America's nuclear chain of command survives even the most catastrophic strike on its terrestrial infrastructure. America does not fly this aircraft into active conflict zones as a diplomatic signal or a psychological operation. It does not position nuclear command infrastructure directly over a live war theater as a bluff. The E-6B Mercury is in the Gulf right now because someone at the highest levels of American military command made the specific calculation that conventional military options are running out. That the situation on the ground is deteriorating faster than it can be stabilized through traditional responses, and that the nuclear option needs to be within operational reach. That is the only reason that aircraft was built. That is the only reason it was deployed. Tucker Carlson, who is not a voice from the anti-war left and cannot be dismissed as a pacifist with no credibility on military matters, said it directly and publicly, without hedging or qualification. This conflict is heading toward nuclear. And then China's most prominent military think tank analyst, a man whose institutional function is to publicly articulate positions that the Communist Party wants placed into international discourse without official government fingerprints attached to them, said something that should stop every person who hears it completely cold. He said America has sustained more military damage in this conflict than at any point since Vietnam. He said the current trajectory is toward nuclear escalation, and he said it must stop immediately. When China's military establishment publicly warns about nuclear drift and calls for immediate de-escalation by name, The alarm bells should be physically uncomfortable. China does not make those statements carelessly or for theatrical effect. China does not expose its strategic assessments in public forums unless the situation has become severe enough that remaining silent would itself constitute a form of complicity in whatever catastrophe is approaching. Beijing has made the calculation that it can no longer afford silence. That calculation tells you everything you need to know about where this conflict actually stands. Iran's military strategy has been executing a doctrine that military theorists call death by 1,000 cuts. And it is now visible in complete operational detail for anyone willing to examine the evidence without the filter of official government narrative. The principle is historically proven and strategically elegant. You do not deliver a single catastrophic blow that galvanizes the enemy's domestic population and unifies political opinion behind the war effort. Instead, you apply constant, relentless, unrelenting pressure. You impose continuous attrition on resources, personnel, equipment, and institutional will simultaneously. You make every single day of the conflict more expensive than the day before it. You make every week's accumulated losses harder to absorb politically and militarily than the week that preceded it. You do this with consistency and patience, without the kind of dramatic single escalation that triggers international intervention until the enemy's capacity to fight, not merely its political will to continue, but its literal physical and logistical capacity to sustain military operations, is exhausted beyond recovery. Iran has been executing this doctrine with precision and discipline, and in the last 24 hours, it executed what its military is officially describing as its most destructive single operational period of the entire conflict. Multiple simultaneous strikes, coordinated across the entire theater, designed to inflict maximum damage on the maximum number of installations in minimum time. And America's nuclear command aircraft is now circling overhead in response. Dubai Marina was struck today. Qatar's international airport has issued an official directive instructing all passengers not to come. The Strait of Hormuz, which was already operating at a fraction of its normal commercial shipping volume, has gone quieter still in a way that reflects exactly what the maritime insurance markets are currently pricing in. And Donald Trump, facing what China's own strategic analysts are describing as the worst American military situation since Vietnam, is reportedly planning to send 5,000 ground troops into Iran. 5,000 soldiers into a country of 90 million people. A country that survived a full 8-year conventional war with Iraq, during which Iraq deployed chemical weapons with Western government support, and still emerged with its territorial integrity completely intact. A country that has endured 40 consecutive years of among the most comprehensive economic sanctions in modern history, without its government collapsing or its military command structure dissolving. A country that by its own official count just killed 220 American soldiers in a single day. For direct historical comparison, America deployed 100,000 troops to Afghanistan and could not hold it for 20 years. The current plan is 5,000 soldiers into Iran. The nuclear command aircraft is already airborne. These two facts existing simultaneously in the same operational reality should be the only thing anyone is discussing right now. China's statements this week deserve precise and careful analysis, because Beijing does not speak carelessly, and what it said constitutes the most credible and detailed external assessment of where this conflict actually stands that has been made publicly available. China's military think tank analyst made 3 specific statements. First, that America has suffered more military damage in this conflict than at any point since Vietnam. Second, that the current trajectory is toward nuclear escalation. Third, that it must stop immediately. More damage than since Vietnam is not rhetorical exaggeration. It is a specific military assessment with specific empirical content behind it. Vietnam cost America 58,000 dead across 20 years of sustained combat operations. The claim is not that this conflict's casualties have approached that cumulative total. The claim is that the rate and completeness of military degradation, the destruction of critical defense infrastructure, the depletion of irreplaceable weapons stockpiles, and the systematic dismantling of America's power projection capability in the region is occurring at a pace and on a scale that has no parallel in the modern era. Half of America's regional Patriot missile defense systems have been destroyed. The THAAD radar installation in Jordan has been eliminated. Between 25 and 30% of American early warning infrastructure in the theater is currently offline. 3 aircraft carrier groups have been deployed into a theater where Iran has already demonstrated the operational capability to force carrier retreats. Interceptor missile stockpiles have been depleted to levels that will take until 2033 to replenish. And now Iran's military is claiming 220 American dead in a single 24-hour period, a number America is officially disputing with figures that the physical evidence of the strikes makes mathematically incoherent. That is the damage profile China is describing as worse than Vietnam. And China has access to intelligence that extends well beyond what is publicly visible. The E-6B Mercury in the Gulf is the American strategic response to that damage profile, not a tactical response to any single Iranian strike, a structural response to the overall and accelerating deterioration of America's military position across the entire theater. The aircraft is there to ensure that if Iran strikes destroy American ground-based command infrastructure at a critical moment, the nuclear chain of command survives intact and remains functional. Countries do not position nuclear command continuity aircraft over active conflict zones as negotiating tactics. They do it when they are seriously contemplating options that require nuclear command continuity to be guaranteed before those options can be considered executable. Tucker Carlson's warning and China's warning are arriving at the identical conclusion from entirely different directions and through entirely different analytical frameworks. The conventional war is being lost faster than it can be managed through available military tools. The nuclear option is being moved closer to operational readiness, and the window during which catastrophic escalation can still be prevented is actively and measurably closing. Iran's response to Trump's announcement of 5,000 ground troops was not diplomatic caution. It was not a request for back-channel negotiation or a quiet signal of willingness to de-escalate. Iran's military commanders responded with 2 words: bring them. The official military statement was explicit and detailed in a way that reflected genuine strategic confidence rather than performed bravado. They said they had been preparing for exactly this scenario for decades. They said they watched Iraq. They said they watched Afghanistan. They said they built their entire defense doctrine, their tunnel infrastructure, their decentralized command architecture, and their popular mobilization capacity, specifically around the operational scenario of American ground forces attempting to enter and sustain operations on Iranian territory. Come, they said. This is the statement of a country that absorbed a full 8-year conventional war, emerged intact, and has spent every subsequent year preparing for the next round. Afghanistan resisted American military occupation with a fraction of Iran's population, a fraction of its organizational capacity, a fraction of its industrial development, and a fraction of its missile capability. It took 20 years and ended with the most visible American military retreat since Saigon. Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is 4 times more populous, dramatically more industrially capable, vastly better armed, and has been preparing specifically for American ground force entry since the day the Iraq campaign demonstrated what American ground operations look like when domestic political will to sustain them finally runs out. 5,000 soldiers entering that environment does not achieve military objectives. It creates hostages, casualties, and the kind of footage that ends political careers and potentially ends wars. The Gulf states are breaking. Not publicly. Not with the kind of direct statements that would humiliate a departing superpower before the alternative security architecture has been confirmed and arranged, but breaking nonetheless. Gulf officials are telling American counterparts privately what they cannot say on camera: that this war was imposed on their territory without genuine consultation, that their soil is being used to launch strikes they did not authorize, that their infrastructure is being destroyed in retaliation for American operations they had no meaningful role in designing, that their civilian populations are in emergency lockdown, that their economies, built through 50 years of disciplined and deliberate effort, are being dismantled in weeks, and that they need American forces to leave before there is nothing remaining worth protecting. Doha's international airport is shut to passengers. Dubai Marina has been struck. Abu Dhabi is on elevated alert. The cities that spent billions building global reputations as the world's safest destinations, cities that genuinely were by every measurable metric among the most stable urban environments on Earth, are now processing missile strikes and emergency government directives. The Gulf that took 50 years to construct is being dismantled in real time. And the entity responsible for its dismantlement is the same entity that was supposed to be its permanent security guarantor. That bill is now due. The intelligence failure that produced this entire situation is not a manageable bureaucratic miscalculation. It is a catastrophic ground-up misunderstanding of what Iran is politically, culturally, militarily, and psychologically. The CIA and MSAD delivered a specific and confident assessment before this war started. Kill the supreme leader, and the Iranian population, exhausted by sanctions and hungry for change, pours into the streets. The regime fractures. The military command collapses in the chaos of sudden decapitation. American and Israeli assets move in to support pro-Western Iranian opposition figures. The Kurds mobilize from the north. The whole structure unravels within weeks, and America emerges with a compliant government in Tehran and access to Iranian energy resources. Every single element of that assessment was wrong. The Iranian population did not celebrate. It went to work. Markets stayed open. Daily life continued with the discipline normally of a population that has spent 45 years being told American power was coming for it, and long ago decided to outlast it rather than collapse before it. The military command did not fracture. It decentralized. 31 independent command centers, each with their own target packages and standing orders, operating simultaneously without requiring central coordination. You cannot decapitate a command structure specifically engineered to survive decapitation. The Kurds did not mobilize. The opposition figures had no popular base, and the oil is still underground, still Iranian, protected by a military that has demonstrated the ability to destroy American defense systems faster than America can replace them. The historical parallel every serious analyst is reaching for is Vietnam. Not in tactics or terrain, but in the fundamental structure of the failure. A war launched on false premises, sustained by institutional momentum and political ego long after the strategic justification collapsed, with casualties managed and minimized in official communications, while the real human cost mounted in ways that eventually became impossible to suppress. A war that ended not with victory, but with evacuation. A war that cost 58,000 American lives and reshaped American domestic politics for a generation. China invoked Vietnam deliberately as the most relevant case study in what happens when American military power encounters an adversary that has decided to outlast it. Iran has made that decision. It has the missiles, the doctrine, the decentralized command structure, the social cohesion, and the 45-year preparation to execute it. America has the world's most expensive military, a nuclear command aircraft airborne over the Gulf, 90% domestic opposition to this war, depleted interceptor stockpiles that won't be replaced until 2033, and a plan to send 5,000 soldiers into a country that just killed, by Iranian count, 220 Americans in 24 hours. The Gulf states are asking America to leave. Iran has offered the same ceasefire terms it offered on day one. Remove the bases, stop the war. China is publicly warning that nuclear escalation is no longer a theoretical risk. The E-6B Mercury is in the air right now, and the plan is to send 5,000 more. The decision changes eventually through elections, through economic reality, through military facts becoming impossible to deny. It always changes. The only question is the price of the delay, and the people paying that price are not the people choosing to delay. They never are. They never are.